Larry, I think everybody here needs to know. I mean, Larry, I know looks white, but he really is not. He's truly Indian, but I think he just stayed in a cold country long enough that he's bleached. But he's really Indian at heart. So just want to get that straight off, you know. So Larry, you and Girija came to India a long time ago as hippies, and it's so hard to believe, but he was a hippie with hair down till here, facial hair, all kinds of stuff. And you came to make movies for Warner Brothers and other movies in a psychedelic van. You were traveling all over the place and ended up with Nimroli Baba. And you started, and by the way, in his spare time, he does have an MD degree. One of the youngest people who graduated with MD, but before practicing, he came to India. And you did all that, and then you ended up with Nimroli Baba. You stayed there for a while, and one day, Nimroli Baba came to you and asked, how much money do you have? And you had to tell him the truth and say, not much. So he caught you in your act and said, you're not really a doctor. So tell us how that conversation led you to your next big move.
I was living in the ashram with my wife, my pativrata, Girija, and we were living in Kenchi ashram, which is near Nainital, which is also very close to Pachuri's birthplace. And my guru said to me, out of the blue, we were doing meditation and we were reading the Bhagavad Gita and we were chanting. And one day he said to me, how much money do you have, Dr. America? That's what he called me. He didn't call me brilliant. He called me Dr. America. And I said, well, I have $500. He said, Jut mut bolo. He said, how much money do you have, not just here, but in America? And I said, well, I have $500 there too. And he said, $500 here, this is all in Pahari, in Hindi. He said, $500 here, $500 there. You're not much of a doctor. You are no doctor, which is what my mother used to say to me, because if you don't have a lot of money, you're not a real doctor. And then he started saying in Hindi, you are no doctor, tum to doctor nahin. And then he started saying in English, you are no doctor, you are no doctor. And then he said, UNO doctor. UNO doctor ho jayega. You will go to villages, you will become a United Nations doctor, and you will help to eradicate smallpox. Because smallpox, this terrible, is khatra mahamari khatam ho jayega. This is God's gift to humanity, that this one kind of suffering will be lifted from the shoulders of humanity because of the hard work of dedicated health workers. We just sat there, and then he said, Tum jao, jao. And I said, where? He said, go to Delhi, go to WHO, and you'll get your job, which was easy enough for him to say. But I really had long hair down to the middle of my back, and I was wearing a long kurta and pajamas, and I walked into the WHO office, and I said, hey guys, my guru who lives in the Himalayas said I'm supposed to come work for you, and that smallpox is going to be eradicated. This is God's gift to humanity.
I am God's gift to humanity.
They said, well, that's fine. Go back to your ashram. And I did that 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 times, back and forth between Nainital and Delhi. And then the woman who was running the smallpox program for WHO, Nicole Grasset, she said, can you type? And you speak Hindi? Can you work as a secretary? Because we don't have any jobs for doctors. And she had to create a position low enough where they could hire me and that it didn't have to go through all the official clearances. And I said, sure, my guru didn't say I was supposed to work in any kind of high-level position.
Yeah.
So that's how I started working at WHO.
So you started as a secretary, and then you took over, taking care of one district. And Meerut, I think you started in Meerut. And then you went to the state. So tell us how you actually eradicated smallpox in the places that you went, and how you ended up running the whole program, starting as a secretary.
I didn't do anything, and I certainly didn't run anything. I was a kid. I was the mascot. I was the youngest person. I was the...
Bacha.
Yeah, I was the toy. I was the chamcha. And, one day I was typing, and Dr. Dutta knows that we had one Russian doctor who was supposed to go there. All these doctors were coming for this special campaign, and India was allowing international doctors in for the first time, and every state and every district that had a lot of smallpox was allocated to one national doctor and one counterpart. And one of the Russian doctors couldn't come, and I don't recall why that was. So we had a hole in the program in Merit, and I had never seen a case of smallpox, and our good friend Dr. Bill Fagey said something like, I'll take the kid out to look at smallpox. And he took me to see my first case of smallpox, which was awful. Before we get too far into this, smallpox was the worst disease perhaps in human history. In the last century, 500 million people died of smallpox. That's not a wordo. 500 million people died of smallpox. And in India, in that year, there were 188,000, mostly children, who had smallpox. And India, in the end, was the last reservoir of smallpox. And until these 150,000 Indians went to every single house in India every month for 20 times, made 2 billion house calls, this terrible epidemic was raging throughout the country. So this big program began. The government of India allowed internationals to come, and when the Russian doctor didn't come, Bill Fagey and Mahendra and M.I.D. Sharma and our other colleagues said, well, let's give this young kid a chance. And they sent me to work in this one district. And very quickly, this program began to work, and smallpox was eradicated, eliminated from Merit district. And then I came back, and gradually all of us were moved around, and I got to work in a division, and then I was asked to go down to Madhya Pradesh. And Girij and I lived for 1 year in Bhopal, and we worked in the Madhya Pradesh program along with a Russian friend, Lev Khodakevich. And then we did eradicate smallpox.
But there's an interesting, before we eradicated it completely, you've gone through Madhya Pradesh, etc. But there was, in Tata Nagar, it was not, being eradicated. There were thousands of cases there. And you were working there, and you got very frustrated, and you did something one night. You went and knocked on someone's door one night and said, take care of this. So what did you do?
Well, we finished smallpox in Madhya Pradesh, and all of the south was cleared. We were down to 4 states still having smallpox. Madhya Pradesh was the 4th. We cleared it out. And then all of a sudden, we started getting importations of smallpox into Madhya Pradesh, and they were all traced to one place, Jamshedpur, to Tata Nagar, to the railway station, because Tata Nagar had a robust economy. People were coming from all over India and getting jobs. Then they were contracting smallpox. They were going to the railway station. They were going home to die. And from that railway station, epidemics went all over the world. And so the government of India and WHO said that I should go to Tata Nagar, which I did. And I found the railway station filled with people who were dying, rivers filled with bodies. It was like a scene out of Hieronymus Bosch. And one night, I was a young kid. At midnight, I said, who runs Tatas? And they told me that this guy, Rusi Modi, who was the head of Tisco, was the guy who ran Tatas. So at midnight, I did something really foolish. I went to his house and I knocked on his door. And the door opened, and 2 big dogs came and took one of each of my hands. And Rusi Modi came up to me and said something very kind and loving, like, who the hell are you? And I explained what smallpox was. And I said, your Tata Nagar is sending smallpox all over to our India. And he said, wait a minute. And he invited me in. And he was having dinner with somebody who worked with him, a young Brahmo Samaj from Bengal, and they were in the back having dinner at midnight, and I told them about smallpox in Tata Nagar, and he said, well, tomorrow we're going to make a phone call to Bombay, and we're going to call JRD Tata. And the next morning he called JRD Tata, and JRD Tata put me on the phone, and JRD Tata says, I want you to come, bring Mahendra Datta, bring Nicole Grasset, come to my house at 22 Prithviraj Road in New Delhi, and let's talk about this. And JRD agreed to give 42 lakh rupees and 500 jeeps, and most importantly, Surjit Gupta, to run the smallpox eradication program in Chota Nagpur. And government of India sent me as the advisor from WHO. And within a very short time, 3 months, we had eliminated smallpox from southern Bihar.
And you actually have some interesting letters, which is my passionate subject, from that time. So you want to tell us about the special letters you have?
Well, J.R.D. Tata got very involved. Mahendra met him, and he can testify that J.R.D. was really interested in smallpox in every aspect of it. He had a couple of rules. One, no money would go directly to the government of Bihar. Everything would be in kind. He would send jeeps and people, and every month he would send a letter, and because I was the advisor, he would send it to me, and it would say, how's it going? What's the case count? What do you need? Anything you need, Tatas will provide. And it would be a typed letter, but the beginning, when he would write, My Dear Larry, would be in turquoise ink, handwritten. And then at the bottom, it would be affectionately yours, JRD. And then he would write a little note. He would say, how's Surjit Gupta doing? Or, is Rusi Modi behaving himself? And I've kept all those letters.
Yeah. So this has been an amazing journey to be part of the team that eradicated smallpox. And you kind of mentioned it along the way, but you said something about the role India played actually, and the number of people that worked on it, because a lot of times the credit goes to the people who are running it. Tell us a little bit about what's the role that India played.
Well, this is really, I think, the dilemma of global health. My friend Salman Ahmed is here, who's not just a rock and roll star from Junoon, but he's also a doctor, and he's now working in Pakistan to help eradicate polio. And you look at the people in polio who are struggling against that epidemic, just as in India, it was the Indian doctors who were struggling against smallpox and then polio. The internationals form a very thin veneer, 1%, half of 1%. But the people who are doing the work, they're Indians and they're Bangladeshis and they're Pakistanis. But when the Westerners write the books, it always sounds like it's the Westerners who are running everything. But that's not the way it was. There were 150,000 people working in the Indian program. There were over 4 million working in the Indian polio program. These are people who leave their life, they leave their career path and their families, and they go, and when it's over, they don't write the books. There aren't movies made about them. They go back to their old job, and if they're lucky, they still have that job. They don't get a bonus. They get a chance to work the way they did before and to remember that fleeting moment when they helped to conquer a global disease and they entered into the stream of history and they played a small bit part on the world stage. But these are the real heroes. These are the ones we have to remember. We have to remember people like M.I.D. Sharma, Muni Inder Dev Sharma, who was my inspiration, Mahendra's friend, who was Commissioner of Health for Government of India, who had so much courage, never took a day off. Mahendra, who never took a day off, who worked every day. Acharya in Bihar. We can name hundreds of people who gave the best years of their life to work to eradicate smallpox. I can name those same people like Jordan in Bangladesh, without whom we wouldn't have eradicated smallpox. I don't think that story gets told. I don't think that India is sufficiently proud of her sons and her daughters who worked to conquer smallpox. India is free of polio. I don't think that the people who worked to conquer polio get their day. These are very hard things to do. They're very hard things to do. And they can't be done without the people who knock on every door, who walk 20 miles, who don't take vacations, who skip promotion, who skip a chance to be in the limelight in order to help their country. They believe in India. Jaya Hind. They work to make this country great. In Pakistan, my friend Sal has written a song, Pakistan Hamara Hai. Take back Pakistan. Take it back so we can conquer polio. These are people who don't get a chance. That's what I really want to talk about.
Yeah. And, after that, you went back to US, you became a professor. And, after that, there is an interesting interaction you had in India with someone who the world admires today. And so tell us about that interaction.
Well, during the smallpox program, Girij and I were privileged enough that we would work on Monday through Friday until we went to move to Bhopal. We'd work on smallpox, but the weekends we had the best counselor you could have, our guru Neem Karoli Baba, who lived near Nainital at an ashram called Kenshi. So we'd go up on the weekends, and he would say, well, how did it go? What do you need? What are the things? And make us, recite some shloka from the Bhagavad Gita or study the Mahabharata. But he would really help us think through the issues that working as a Westerner in the Indian bureaucracy was. And at the ashram, there were lots of young people who came from the West. Just after Maharshi died, a 19-year-old kid came and was very disappointed because he arrived after our guru had died. And he shaved his head and he was walking barefoot, going through the Himalayas, like all the other young Westerners of the time who came at the time of Dhammadam, Mitajayagam, And this young kid, whose name was Steve Jobs, he got the idea for a computer that could think in color while he was living in Kenshi. And people thought he was kind of a little bit nutty. And every once in a while, he'd come down to Delhi, maybe looking for a good hot meal. And I remember once taking him to the WHO canteen in Indraprastha Estate and buying him lunch. And when Girij and I went back to India, back to the US from India, Steve had started Apple Computer, and we wanted to start another organization to do something like smallpox again. And we decided to form something called the Sabre Foundation and to work on blindness because Nicole Grasset, our former boss, became very interested in blindness. And Steve gave us the money to start the Sabre Foundation and gave us computers and software and help in establishing blindness programs, first in Nepal, now in India, and all over the world.
Sabre Foundation not only cured, but it actually helped start Arvind Eye Foundation, a lot of things here. Since it started, over 4 million people almost 4 million have been cured of blindness, etc. Now you're doing Sabre, but you also dabbled into technology. You started the Well, and you started interacting with the technology community fairly early in the day. So, and tell us a little bit of your journey with Well and how it ended up.
Well, let me just talk a little bit for a second about Aravind.
Yeah.
It's the same theme. I don't think Indians get it. I don't think Indians are proud enough of India's sons and daughters to understand what's been done here. The Aravind Eye Hospital is the largest and the best eye hospital in the world. People come from all over to see and to learn how to do surgery. Aravind now has 7 hospitals, 5,000 beds, sees over 1 million patients a year, has trained people in 50 countries how to do surgery. And when Girij and I first met Dr. Venkataswamy, who I don't know if you know who he was, but he was Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan, and we watched the magic of sight-restoring surgery, this idea that he has exported all throughout the world. We've been privileged to work with him. So we set up this organization really in part to help Dr. V and to support him and people like that. We needed to have a computer system to keep track of all the various things. There were no electronic medical records at the time. So Steve had given me an Apple II, and I was playing around with a University of Michigan computer system, playing around with something called computer conferencing. And we started using it to run the Sabre Foundation. Now this is 1979, 1980. It was before the internet. We had a little acoustic modems, 300 baud modems, that made the sound of cats when they talked to each other. And one day Steve came to visit us and stayed with us in Ann Arbor, and I showed him this thing called Sabre talk that we were using to run Sabre. And then I asked him for more money. And he said something like, look, you've got a product there. Why don't you take your own product and make your own company, then make your own money, then fund your own foundation, which seemed like a very good idea. And he helped introduce us to a venture capitalist, then an investment banker, and we wound up taking the well public. And that's how sort of we got involved in technology.
Yeah. And actually, I heard of Larry. I met him because he started working with Intel a little bit in some of the work that we were doing with a lot of other companies. And so I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit. Say a little bit about, you came when the tsunami happened, you came and through that you got involved in the polio program, and you were one of the people who was part of the last case of polio being eradicated out of India, right?
Well, no, I saw the last case of variola major, smallpox, in Bangladesh, a little girl named Rahima Banu on Bola Island. Yeah, I did see some of the last cases of polio in the world in India, and the last case of smallpox, which is why I'm always optimistic about anything.
Eradicating things.
Yeah.
And then, you seem to have a trend of doing things that are very small and insignificant. So then you went on to another small company called Google, and then you managed Google.org. That was the time when Larry and Sergey were thinking of using Google.org in a big way. So you ran Google.org. So share a little bit about what are some of the things you did in Google.org.
Well, Google.org was started as part of Larry and Sergey's dream of creating a different kind of company. And in their letter to investors when they were first raising money, the very first round, they said, look, we're going to be a different kind of company, and you should not invest in this company if you don't believe that corporations should do philanthropy. And there was a guy, Mark Benioff, who started Salesforce. And Salesforce.com had created a 1-1-1 model. That when they were started, he would give 1% of the capital, 1% of the profits, and 1% of the people to philanthropy. And he talked Larry and Sergey into agreeing that they would do the same thing. So Google.org was established with 1% of all the stock in Google, 1% of all the profits, and 1% of all the people. And when you're a $300 billion company, that's a little bit more than just loose change.
Yeah.
We worked on three things: economic development, climate change, and pandemics. And when I was there, we gave away almost $250 million just in those three things. And I'm very proud of the work that Google did very early. I think it set the stage for a lot of the conversations about climate change right now.
And also that sort of led to your current occupation with the Skoll Foundation, where you're heading the Threats Fund. So I think the work you did on pandemic, the work you did on diseases, etc., is helping form the strategy and for the Threats Fund. So you want to share a little bit about the Skoll Foundation and the Threats Fund? So
this is for all of you who are on the private sector. How many of you work for companies and corporations? Probably about half of you. So Jeff Skoll, my friend Jeff, who was the co-founder of eBay, he made a few $1 billion from eBay. And almost right away, he gave $1 billion to start the Skoll Foundation. And Skoll Foundation has given awards called the Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship to just over 90 individuals, about 8 of them from India. And each of these awards are about $1 million, $1.5 million. They're 3-year awards. They go simultaneously to the social entrepreneur and the organization, and they're all for social entrepreneurs. He did that. He continued to do many other things, started a small movie company called Participant Media, which has now had 65 movies, 35 Academy Award nominations. You've heard some of the movies: Inconvenient Truth, Contagion, Syriana, Good Night, Good Luck, The Kite Runner, The Help, The Visitor, The Soloist, Lincoln, and movies like that. But Jeff worried that there were a category of things that could happen in the world that could ruin his best intentions but everybody's best intentions, all the work that he was doing to try to build a better and more sustainable world could be destroyed by a bad pandemic, by climate change, by unchecked nuclear proliferation, by water issues that went unresolved, and by a regional conflict like the Middle East or India, Pakistan, that escalated into a global conflagration.
Or a nuclear
nuclear non-proliferation, and especially here, where all of those things occur at once, because as the Himalayas melt and water issues between China and India, Pakistan become tense among nuclear-armed countries, you could almost see the worst-case scenario playing out. So he decided to put more money into another philanthropy, a second foundation, to deal with these issues, and I've been privileged to run that for the past 5 years.
Yeah. So I want to end on a rather colorful side of you, which is somehow getting yourself involved in movies. So it started with your long time ago, long hair, hippie journey to India. So you want to share with us the movie in which actually, if we went back and rented it, we can see Girija and you playing a part in the movie. You want to sing the song a little bit, tell us what part you guys played?
Not unless you can actually provide physical evidence.
Yeah.
So when we came to India, it was, I had just finished my internship. We were living in San Francisco, and Warner Brothers wanted to make a movie about the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane, all these rock and roll bands. They had this crazy idea of some kind of a reverse pilgrimage, beginning with the Haight-Ashbury and going back somehow to Canterbury. It never really made sense, but it was a lot of fun. It was a terrible movie, and I played a young doctor in that movie, and it ended with a Pink Floyd concert in Canterbury, and I was the rock doc. I was the doctor taking care of the tent. And then after the movie was over, we decided we wanted to do it again. So we did a concert at the Roundtree in London. We raised some money. We bought 2 buses, a German Mann bus and a Leyland transport, and we drove from London to Kathmandu. And it took us 2 years, and we spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Iran, and
all the places where you just fit right in.
Well, it was sort of what really motivated us was not the drugs. It was...
Not only the drugs. Not only the drugs.
It was a different time, right? But we never passed a mosque. We never passed a temple or a gurdwara or a church without stopping and praying. And it was a deeply spiritual trip for us. And as we got closer and closer to India, it was like the dance of 1,000 veils, as our image of this wonderful country got brighter and brighter, and the Western world that we were part of fell away. And it was a pilgrimage for us. And it ended a little bit for us. We got into Kathmandu, and we took our buses and we brought them up to Swayambhu, that hill overlooking Kathmandu. And we were deeply going to Buddhist vihars. And then we heard that there was this crazy producer called Devanand, and he was doing a movie celebrating how wonderful hippies were and how spiritual their pilgrimage was. And he came over to our bus, and he asked us if we would all play in this movie called Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. And it was going to be about how great the hippie movement was and how much we were only here because of the spiritual part and not about drugs. And then he lied to us. And then he made, Dhammada Dham, Nityajaya Gam, Bola Subhasham, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. And Girija has a very big part in it, where she's singing along with Zina Taman. And the camera goes into her and pans on her face when she says, "Can we go a little faster, man?"
So, and then you're also part of, you did the first treatment, you were part of writing Contagion with Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow, etc. And also
how many people saw Contagion? Good movie? Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah. That's what a real pandemic looks like. The science is impeccable, unfortunately. I wish that were an exaggeration.
Yeah. And then I want to wrap up on the movie that you actually did about the polio eradication and that it, was submitted for a national award.
So a group that doesn't get much attention is the Rotary clubs. We sort of think of them as just being there all the time, they're everywhere. But we wouldn't have eradicated polio in India without Rotary. Rotary has given almost $2 billion towards the eradication of polio. And you see these Rotarians everywhere in India and Pakistan with their yellow vests and a little whistle they have, and they're kind of corny, and you think, but these are heroes. At every time there's a vaccination drive, it's the Rotarians who have been organizing that. And I wanted to make a movie that talked about the difficulties of working where polio eradication had a complicated history, and this wonderful job that the volunteers were doing, especially in Aligarh and Lucknow and Moradabad and in Pakistan. So we made a movie called The Final Inch about polio eradication. We got an Oscar nomination for it. We didn't get the Oscar. And now we've distributed that movie to every Rotary Club in the world. And probably something like 15 million people have seen that movie. And I hope that it's made people appreciate the work that's being done by the common person, not just by these lofty epidemiologists who become experts if their plane actually flies over the capital city.
So that's Mr. aptly named Brilliant's journey so far.